In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King holds talks with Britain's Prime Minister and expresses his anger at Israeli escalation in Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque. European countries impose border controls in the face of an unprecedented influx of migrants. And Australia will have a new Prime Minister after the ruling Liberal Party votes out Tony Abbott in favour of longtime rival Malcolm Turnbull. Hello and welcome. His Majesty the King held talks with British Prime Minister David Cameron, who is on a tour in the Middle East, and discussed regional crises and bilateral ties. The impact of the Syria crisis and the Israeli violations at Al-Aqsa Mosque were high on the agenda. This report has more.
The problem of Syrian refugees, the global fight against terrorism and escalated Israeli attacks on worshippers in Jerusalem figured high as His Majesty the King hosted British Prime Minister David Cameron. King Abdullah described Anglo-Jordanian relations as historic and said the two countries need to further strengthen cooperation. The King also commended Britain's humanitarian role as it opened its borders to migrants seeking to get to Europe.
Prime Minister, if you'll allow me, I'm delighted to have you back here in Jordan as a dear friend to me and to this country. And the relationship between Jordan and Britain has been a long and a historic one. I think even more so over the past several years as we have come closer, shoulder to shoulder, with not only the regional challenges that we've had to face, but unfortunately the global challenges that have been a major problem for all of us as we've been having to fight this global threat of terror. What we in the Islamic world called the Khawarij, the outlaws or renegades of Islam. And you and I have discussed this before, that this is a global fight that brings all religions together. And Jordanian and British troops have been standing shoulder to shoulder in many regions, and again, we will continue to do so. And I know that this is some of the discussions I look forward to having here with you. Equally as important, you're here to look at the issue of refugees. We commend the role that your government and your country has played in this respect, and commend the role that Europe has been playing in opening its borders and its hearts to the haunting images that we've seen of migrants trying to get to Europe. As you know, that Jordan has had this burden of refugees for some time now. 1/5 of our population, over 20%, are Syrian refugees, only 15% of which are in the refugee camp which you visited today. We're very thankful for the role your government has played in supporting Jordan with the refugee issues. But again, I think the role that Jordan has played has been I think a role that has lessened the burden on Europe, and we hope that obviously the international community will be able to deal with this terrible humanitarian crisis. And I know that England has always been there to help Jordan and to find a solution to the Syrian problem. And again, we'll have a chance to discuss these issues. I look forward to the discussions we're going to have this afternoon. And in your presence, if I can just say one last issue, that we in Jordan have been very concerned and angered with recent escalations in Jerusalem, specifically in Al-Aqsa Mosque. And we have gotten reassurances from the Israeli government that this will not happen. Unfortunately, these are reassurances we've heard in the past. So I'd like to state in your presence that if this continues to happen, actually as of today, any more provocations in Jerusalem will affect the relationship between Jordan and Israel, and Jordan will have no choice but to take action, unfortunately. But having said that, welcome back to this country. You're a great friend of Jordan, and we thank you and the British people for the wonderful relationship, and I look forward to the discussions we're going to have this afternoon.
Cameron thanked Jordanians for the extraordinary generosity they have shown, hosting so many displaced Syrians.
Well, thank you very much, Your Majesty, for that welcome, and it's a great honour for me to be back in Jordan with Your Majesty. The first thing I want to do is to thank the Jordanian people through you for the extraordinary generosity that they have shown hosting so many Syrian refugees. And I've seen this with my own eyes this afternoon here in your country. As you say, Britain and Jordan have a very strong relationship. I think it's got stronger over recent years, and we want to build on that. First of all, on the issue of Syria, Britain is the second largest contributor to the Syrian refugee crisis after the United States of America. We're proud of that. We'll continue with that investment. We hope other countries will do more, because it's so important to help keep people close to their homes, to clothe them, feed them and house them close to their homes, so they don't make that perilous journey across the seas, which has led to such appalling losses of life. But of course in Britain we will be taking 20,000 Syrian refugees straight out of refugee camps here in Jordan and elsewhere, and give them a home in our country. I absolutely agree with Your Majesty that we need to continue to face up to the global threat of terrorism, which we see in such evidence with ISIL, with Daesh in Syria, and the threat they pose to the whole region, and in Iraq, of course, as well. I also hope we'll be able to discuss, as you said, the situation with regards to peace between Israel and the Palestinians. I had a meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu about this issue last week, and he said he was ready to talk to the Palestinian leader without preconditions, and we very much want to do everything we can to encourage that process. We also continue to work with you on defence. I'm very proud of the work that our armed forces are doing in collaboration and cooperation with yours, and so that and the economic cooperation we have to help strengthen the Jordanian economy, all these issues show the very close relationship between our countries, which we can discuss today.
The British Prime Minister had earlier visited a Zaatari refugee camp in northern Jordan, where he met Syrian children forced to flee the war-stricken country. He met a boy who had his leg amputated, who told Cameron he wants to go back home one day. The Prime Minister was also shown around a school run by UNICEF with the help of British aid. Jordan hosts over 630,000 registered Syrian refugees who had fled the raging civil war there. Hala Debabne for the News at 10.
The British Prime Minister was earlier in Lebanon, where he visited Syrian refugees. His tour comes a week after pledging that Britain would take in up to 20,000 people who are currently in camps after fleeing Syria's civil war. Cameron met Lebanese Prime Minister Tamam Salam after touring one of the tented settlements in Lebanon's Beqa Valley, where many live without easy access to electricity and clean water. Lebanon currently hosts well over 1 million Syrians, and 1 person in every 4 in the country is a refugee. The government has called on other countries to share the burden. King Abdullah also welcomed Albanian Foreign Minister Ditma Bushati and said Jordan is willing to strengthen relations with Albania. His Majesty said Jordan would build on the outcome of his visit to Tirana in June, where he agreed with Albanian President Bujar Nishani to further enhance cooperation in various fields. The King and the Albanian minister spoke of the need to expand ties and seize the economic opportunities available in both countries to boost trade. The meeting also dealt with the crises in the region, namely Syria, Iraq and Libya, and underlined political solutions in the war-torn countries. The fight against terrorism and extremism also figured high on the discussion, with emphasis being on the need for a holistic approach to counter this menace. Foreign Minister Nasser Jude and his Albanian counterpart also discussed issues of concern to the Muslim world, foremost of which is the fight against terrorism and extremism. Jude said Jordan is in the vanguard of the anti-terror effort, quoting the King's reiteration that the war on terrorism is our war. His Majesty the King met visiting member of the French Senate and the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, Josette Douet, who is on a regional tour. During the meeting, the King commended the friendship and political and economic cooperation between Jordan and France. Talks focused on parliamentary relations and the exchange of expertise among legislative institutions in both countries. They also discussed Jordan's parliament's request for Partner for Democracy status with the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. The meeting also dealt with ways to address regional issues, mainly the Syria crisis. The French lawmaker praised Jordan's reform process and the King's efforts with all influential parties to bring about peace to the region. The lower house strongly condemned repeated Israeli assaults against the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied Jerusalem. It said in a statement that the storming of Haram al-Sharif shrine and assaulting worshippers by Jewish extremists and special forces is a flagrant violation of international law. The House said the desperate attempt by Israel, the occupying power, to alter the status quo at Al-Aqsa Mosque would embolden the Palestinians and lay bare Israeli designs breaches to the international community. It said Jordan would stand up against Israeli attacks on Jerusalem's Muslim and Christian. Egyptian security forces opened fire on a group of tourists after mistaking the convoy for militants they were hunting in the desert. At least 12 people were killed and 10 others were wounded. Mexico's foreign ministry, meanwhile, said at least 2 Mexicans were among the dead, though Egyptian security and judicial sources later said 8 Mexicans and 4 Egyptians were killed. The Egyptian Interior Ministry said a joint force from the Egyptian police and military was chasing militants in the country's vast western desert, which borders Libya, when it opened fire on the convoy. Egypt's tourism ministry said the convoy of 4 four-wheel drive vehicles was at an off-limits site and was using unlicensed cars. It said convoy was taking part in an unapproved safari. The Egyptian Interior Ministry said there will be an investigation into the incident. Saudi-led coalition forces pounded military targets held by Iran-backed Houthi rebels in the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. The stepped-up airstrikes by the Arab coalition came in the aftermath of a Houthi attack on Gulf troops that killed more than 60 earlier this month. Today's raid struck a Ministry of Defense building and the Daylami military air base near the capital's main international airport. There were no reports of casualties. The airstrikes came a day after 5 Saudi soldiers were killed near the border with Yemen. A United Arab Emirates soldier was also killed yesterday in the ground offensive in the Yemeni province of Ma'rib, where coalition forces are engaged in a battle to retake the territory from the Houthis. In a serious blow to peace efforts, Yemen's exiled government pulled out of UN-mediated peace talks with the Houthis, casting doubt on the prospects of resolving the 6-month-old conflict. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán expected a high rate of asylum requests to be rejected after tougher new rules take effect from midnight. Orbán was also quoted as saying in an interview that his government is more likely to declare a crisis situation tomorrow due to mass migration. Meantime, European interior ministers were holding crisis talks with Germany, France and the bloc's Executive Commission, trying to overcome opposition from Eastern members to plan to relocate 160,000 refugees from Italy, Hungary and Greece. Here's more.
The 2-decade-old era of border-free travel in Europe seems to be falling apart. More countries have imposed controls on their frontiers in response to an unprecedented influx of migrants. Austria, Slovakia and the Netherlands said they would tighten controls hours after Germany imposed checks on its border with Austria, while Hungary will bring in border controls at midnight. The new measures challenge the EU's Schengen Agreement on free movement. United Nations Human Rights Chief His Royal Highness Prince Zaid bin Riyad urged Europe to build on a surge of sympathy for refugees by setting up comprehensive policies to expand migration's channels. In a speech opening the UN Human Rights Council, he called for a halt to detention and ill treatment of asylum seekers.
We need expanded channels of regular migration and resettlement, 2 measures which would prevent deaths and cut smuggling. Detention, particularly of children, and all forms of ill treatment should cease at borders and elsewhere. I concur that there is no one swift solution to the terror, the trauma, the deprivation and neglect that drive so many millions of people to leave all that they have and all they have ever known.
German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier called on other European countries to follow Germany's example and take in their fair share of refugees. He says Germany clearly cannot manage this burden alone. If everybody takes on their fair share, then the burden will be manageable for everybody. European Union members were also on collision course over proposals to distribute asylum seekers across the continent, a plan backed by Germany but strongly opposed by Eastern European countries.
We think that quotas is not the solution, and we have to help the countries which are most affected by this huge flows of migrants.
As migrants and refugees are rushing to enter Europe before new emergency immigration laws come into force, at least 34 people, including 15 babies and children, drowned when their overcrowded boat capsized off a Greek island. The victims' identities and nationalities were unclear. Most of the migrants who surged into Europe in recent weeks fled conflict, oppression and poverty in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Eritrea. Loy Balkar for the news at 10.
Back here at home, Prime Minister Abdullah Ansur said the government took a set of measures to help boost the tourism sector, which was hit by the turmoil sweeping the region. At a meeting with the Jordan Society of Tourism and travel agents and lawmakers, Ansur called on Jordanians from all walks of life to do whatever they can to help the vital tourism industry flourish again. He said schools and universities had a key role to raise awareness on the importance of tourism as it contributes to the development of local communities. State Minister for Media Affairs, Mohammed Al-Momani, updated spokespeople of ministries and government entities on domestic issues and regional developments. He called on the officials to keep channels open with local media outlets and maintain coordination with them. Momani called on spokespeople to provide accurate and reliable information when needed. The minister said he will hold regular meetings with official spokespersons to keep them posted on the kingdom's policy towards various developments. Australia will get its 5th Prime Minister in 8 years after the ruling Liberal Party voted out Tony Abbott in favour of long-time rival Malcolm Turnbull. The change in government followed months of speculation and crumbling support from voters. Turnbull, a multi-millionaire former banker and tech entrepreneur, won a secret party room vote by 54 to 44.
In the leadership was contested by Malcolm Turnbull and Tony Abbott. Malcolm Turnbull was successful on 54, Tony Abbott 44, and we had one informal of 99. For the position of Deputy Leader, we had, to repeat that, 54 and 44.
Minister Julie Bishop was elected Deputy Leader of the party, which, with junior coalition partner, the National Party, won a landslide election in 2013. Since then, the popularity of the government, and Abbott in particular, has suffered from a series of perceived policy missteps, destabilising infighting and leaks. And the opposition Labour Party has consistently led opinion polls, while Turnbull has been consistently viewed as preferred Prime Minister. Real Madrid were training ahead of the Champions League opener against Shakhtar Donetsk at the Santiago Bernabeu Stadium tomorrow. Real are going into the clash against the Ukrainians on the back of an impressive 6-0 win over Espanyol in La Liga over the weekend, with Cristiano Ronaldo scoring 5. Both James Rodriguez and Danilo remain injured and were the only players from the team unable to take to the training pitch. Novak Djokovic vanquished longtime rival Roger Federer 6-4, 5-7, 6-4, 6-4 to win the US Open and cap one of the greatest Grand Slam seasons of all time. The victory gave Djokovic 3 of the year's 4 Grand Slam titles, with a loss to Swiss Stanislas Wawrinka in the French Open final, his only blemish. It was the 10th career major for Djokovic, but only his 2nd US Open. And Gary Hunt and Rachelle Simpson claimed wins at the Italian round of the Red Bull Cliff Diving World Series at Polignano. For Hunt, the victory was his 6th of the year, and the Briton was awarded 5 perfect 10s by the judges through 3 rounds of competition in Italy. Hunt has already clinched the overall 2015 world title, with his only loss coming last month at the Bosnian Tour stop. Simpson's victory earned her the 2015 women's title, a 2nd straight Red Bull Cliff Diving World Series title. The men will complete their 8 event season in Bilbao, Spain in 2 weeks' time. Now, a look at the weather forecast. Moderate weather prevails across many regions tonight, with a chance for light rain, especially in the country's east, while winds will be northwesterly fresh. Tomorrow, relatively hot weather is forecast for much of the hilly areas and hot elsewhere. There will be a chance for thundery showers, which might turn to heavy downpours in some other areas. Light rain is also forecast for the Gulf of Aqaba, with northerly moderate winds and slightly choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And before we close, all ministries and public institutions will observe a holiday from Wednesday, September the 23rd through Sunday the 27th on the occasion of Eid al-Adha. The holiday of Eid al-Adha, the feast celebrated across the Muslim world at the end of the Hajj pilgrimage season, was announced by the office of Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour. To close, our top stories once again. His Majesty the King holds talks with Britain's Prime Minister and expressed his anger at Israeli escalation in Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque. European countries impose border controls in the face of an unprecedented influx of migrants. And Australia will have a new Prime Minister after the ruling Liberal Party votes out Tony Abbott in favour of long-time rival Malcolm Turnbull. And with this we come to the end of this edition of the news. My name's Raad Lapouche. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good night.